Hey guys, this is going to be my review of Star Trek Discovery Season 3, Episode 7. I had to look there. The episode's called Unification 3. And the main plot of this episode is that the Starfleet and Michael in particular, they're pushing to get some crucial data from this experiment, the data being SB19 from this experiment which took place like years and years ago, which they suspect could have maybe caused the burn or could lead them to the origins of the burn. But to get this data, they must negotiate with the people who hold it, who are the Romulans. So the Romulans are introduced in this version of Discovery here. And so what basically happens is that Michael finds out through the Admiral that years ago the Romulans and the Klingons were actually brought together by her late brother Spock. So Spock gets brought back into it in this episode, and basically they don't trust Starfleet because they blame Starfleet for the burn. The most they attain at this point is that the burn was actually caused by an experiment gone wrong, and it appears to have happened when these three particular ships all kind of exploded at the same time. The burn was caused by an experiment gone wrong. But Michael believes from the data they have from the black box, then it was caused by something else, not something from Starfleet. So what basically happens is that they're told then they have to convince the Romulans of this. Or the Vulcans, actually. It's the Vulcans they have to convince to get this crucial data. And that's basically the plot of the episode. It's a very traditional Star Trek style episode where Michael, the Admiral insists that she's the one to go to this planet. Or, well, not to the planet, they beam up onto the ship, but there's basically this trial that's held with Michael where she has to make her scientific case to allow them to let her use the data. And obviously they're very suspicious. Starfleet now has a bad history because of the burn and them being blamed for the burn. But the reason Michael is picked and the Admiral says, yeah, she's the best one to try and negotiate, is because of her connection to Spock, because of her obviously being his brother, and because of that, Michael believes that, or the Admiral believes Michael is best suited. And this is obviously against Saru's wishes, because Michael, previous episode, went all rogue, not for the first time. As a result, she's been demoted, so she's lost her number 2 spot. She's like basically a crew member. So when the Admiral suggests this, Saru is like, but what about what she did and stuff? But in this episode, the Admiral thinking of the bigger picture, and he says, but we need her, basically, and this is important stuff. I guess it seems a bit convenient for the purposes of the episode he's willing to overlook this, because to be fair, this Admiral seems a pretty by-the-book type guy. And in the past, he hasn't. He's always said, well, we've got our own missions and kind of the burn can wait and stuff like that. But I guess you might say then because they've got some significant, they're getting somewhere, let's say, and this could be a crucial piece of the puzzle, then maybe he's put it as a priority, and obviously he's Saru has to kind of go with it, but that's the whole thing. So the trial and the interactions take up a big part of the episode, and it's a mixed bag of an episode. I would say it's a frustrating episode at points, and I think some of the frustrations of the Michael character sort of comes out. I think a lot of the courtroom stuff, if you want to call it a court, but the trial stuff, it's really well done actually. The acting's good and the interactions, and it is quite sort of meaty. I think it feels quite dramatic. It's just in some of it, the plotting and stuff, you sort of question. And I might have said this last week, then I do actually like Rogue Michael. I think that's when the character is kind of at her best. And I think I just like the fact that not that it's different, because obviously in the past, captains like Kirk especially, but also Picard had that sort of rogue element. But I guess Michael maybe even more so. But I think the problem in this episode is that at times it's inconsistent on how we're meant to read Michael, and how, whether we're meant to be sympathetic for a cause or not. It kind of jumps back and forth. She does a lot of murky stuff, and it just makes you unsure about her, and she's not always likable. And I think that's the thing. I think although she's been rogue and done kind of murky stuff in the series, I think in the past they've at least made her quite likable, or at least where you can understand her sort of actions. But I think there is some sloppy writing in this episode, let's say. One moment I did like actually is when Michael goes to... Oh, actually, I will mention there's a dreary opening, because normally they open with a voiceover and a monologue, and obviously last week's I really liked. It was Saru's, his sort of first captain log, but in this it's Michael, and it's just this unneeded dreary voiceover. And again, I think it's only a small moment, but it's that sort of moment where Michael taking herself a bit too seriously, a bit too kind of self-indulgent, this dreary sort of like monologue set to music. We see her like sleeping with books, so their relationship has obviously gone to the next level. They're close after last week's kiss, and books obviously supporting her, but ultimately at the end of this episode they're sort of broken up again, because she obviously decides to stay on the ship. But the moment I like after this actually is when when Michael goes to Tilly, and obviously Tilly's the one been looking at the data from the black box, and she's critical of Michael from last week. She basically says, you put me in a bad position last week going behind my back, or going behind Saru's back. Because actually there was a nice moment last week where Tilly stuck up for Saru and said, I don't blame you. She's in the wrong. She's put us in a bad position here. So I do like that they follow that up this week, and Tilly's kind of giving Michael the silent treatment. Or not exactly the silent treatment, but she's she's very off with her, which you can't really blame her. But it's a nice follow up, and it's a good sort of character moment for Tilly. So that's obviously the scene when she gives the data of the burn to Michael, and that sets the whole plot in motion. And this episode is very sort of fan servicey, so it obviously goes back to the stuff with Michael and her family, and we get these flashbacks to Spock. So we see like the Discovery version of Spock, and we also see the original Leonard Nimoy, where they tie it into the whole plot with the burn, and it becomes a whole thing in the episode, which that's another problem. Because I wasn't that into the Spock stuff last season, and I think they're just overdoing the fan servicey thing. I don't mind some references to it's inedible, and it would probably be wrong if they didn't tie some stuff in, but I think they just overdid it with the whole, Destiny thing and the Red Angel thing last season. Also, I've never really felt there was a need to make, Michael Spock's sister. I didn't really buy into that or think it was needed. But the flashback in the footage we see this episode is quite well done. It sort of serves a purpose, but it obviously becomes a big thing in the episode, her connection to Spock, because actually her mother then beams aboard, because initially you get this the commander, the representation of the Vulcans, and she comes across first of all, and there's some good stuff with her and Saru in the episode, actually, when she's kind of telling Saru, well, just how hard it's going to be for Michael to convince them, and the fact that there's been many mishaps and many cock-ups from Starfleet, or at least stuff which is blamed on Starfleet from the Romulan side, or the Vulcan side, I should say. So her point is that it'll take a lot to kind of bring Starfleet and their side together. Even if Michael convinces them of this one thing and she gets the data, that won't be the end to the friction. But by the end, she does warm more to Saru, quite impressed with what Michael does and stuff, and quite impressed with the setup on Discovery. So I quite liked some of the scenes with Saru and this representative, this commander. But then one surprise is that Michael's mum makes a cameo, because she appears and she's almost like a chair to the whole thing. She's like this mediator. So she has the emotional reuniting with Michael, and there's some good stuff with the mother. I like the actress. It's just, again, maybe they go a bit overboard with this, with all these personal connections to Michael and stuff. But again, the mother and her first interaction with Michael is partly to sell how difficult this is going to be to change their minds, because she basically says to Michael, you won't convince the jury, and the reason for that is they all have their own agendas. This is very political, and they all have their things, and we see that when Michael gets in there. I should say, first of all, Michael uses a loophole to even get into and set the thing up, because what happens is she originally this commander isn't going to gain them access. She's not interested at all. But then Michael uses the fact that she's, well, first of all, she's Spock's brother or sister, Freudian slip, but more so than she trained at the Vulcan Academy, so she has that past, and so it's basically a loophole. So they let her through on based on that. Their hands are kind of tied. So again, that immediately puts Michael in a murky sort of area. But I do quite like them tapping into certain loopholes and stuff like that, and it's almost for the greater mission in a way. And there's some good stuff, as I said, in the trial. It does feel very dramatic. They sort of question Michael. Can she be trusted? Because she's representing Starfleet. Also, is she too biased because of her connection to Spock? And is she using that That's the whole thing. That's almost like the big theme of the trial, and if they will ultimately be convinced, are they convinced that Michael is telling the truth? Then she's acting honestly. She's not just using this and using her connection to Spock as a way to get what Starfleet want. So it's almost like they don't so much have a grudge with Michael. It's more Starfleet and that baggage and the history which is working against Michael, but actually for a long time her connections to Spock works against her, because they think that she's just using that to get an advantage, to get them to change their minds and let her have the data. And I think what's kind of interesting about this is that they may well be right. I think there probably is an element to that. And so I think we're meant to think that maybe there's a change around in Michael, and that she comes around. There's sort of a change by the end of the episode. Now, how long that change lasts will be interesting to see when we move forward next week and stuff. But I think there is meant to be a certain change during the episode in Michael and her intentions. But yeah, for the first part of the jury, things are not going so well, and Michael does try and convince them, saying, because I think there's one that's maybe leaning towards her way, but then there's one who's definitely against her, and one a bit in the middle, but probably going to go against her ultimately. But Michael does try and use the Spock inference. She kind of says that he would be against putting politics over new technology and exploring, basically, which is what she sees this as being. And that's when they really turn on her, say, well, she's just playing the Spock card sort of thing. So they have like this sort of break where Michael goes off and talks to the mother, and this is where Michael hits a new low, really, because she tries to get her mother to help her, basically, to try and use her inference to convince the jury. And this is that's what that scene basically consists of, and that's a real what the fuck sort of moment. I mean, come on here, Michael. Even you shouldn't be this cheap. But no, mother obviously stands the ground. There's no way. They go back in, and you get this really dramatic sort of turn where the mother really grills Michael, where she basically does. Not so much turns on her, because from her point of view, she's bringing up fair points, and she's being impartial, which you would want her to be. But it's just this unexpected moment where, because of her being her mother and stuff, but she does really grill Michael, because Michael is trying to present it as, well, she's truthful and it's for the greater good and all that. But then Michael brings up when it, or the mother brings up, when it comes to trust, what about the past? What about Giorgio? What about the way you turned on Giorgio? And I think what I like about this is it's something was it the previous? Yeah, I'm pretty sure the previous episode brought up when Giorgio and Michael were working together. Giorgio clearly hasn't forgotten, so Michael's mother brings that up as an issue of trust, and also the fact that for the second time now she's been demoted, because she was demoted originally and now she's been demoted again. So recent history also working against Michael, and so there's this turnaround where Michael gets all emotional, which again I'm not so keen on, because I don't think the actress is the best when it comes to expressing emotion. And I think they've overdone the, Michael breaking down, having these big emotions type scene. Again, a lot of whispering, she gets quite emotional. But what basically happens is the mother kind of forces Michael to be truthful. She asks her a question about why she is still searching for her identity, why she's still sort of so lonely, and that's like meant to be the one the one moment where Michael talks to them as like a human being. And come here. And that sort of convinces them, or convinces the mother. The mother's like, "Thank you. Now you're being honest." And what happens is they still say no. The jury like stand their ground and they say no, you can't have the data. They're not convinced. So what happens is, and this is obviously meant to be a big character moment for Michael, is she says that she will give them, that she will stand down, she'll stop pursuing this, but that she'll continue, pursuing this mission a different way. And that's almost like an act of faith with the Vulcans from the Federation. Really, it's a way of saying, okay, I accept this decision, and yeah. So yeah, it's sort of an act of faith and trust. And then she kind of gets the data anyway. The mother gives it to her, so that's kind of a term, but it's whatever. But anyway, and that kind of sets the ball rolling at the end when she goes back to the crew with the data, and that's moving us forward again. But some good stuff, some not so good with Michael in this episode. And the other big plot of the episode, which they don't spend too long on, but Tilly becomes the new number 2. She takes on Michael's role temporarily. It's not a permanent appointment from Saru, because ultimately he will go for someone more experienced. He will look for a permanent. But in the meantime, he gives Tilly the job, and there's some hesitation with Tilly, but by the end of the episode, she's been convinced. Because at first, when she goes to like stance with it, he's a bit awkward with her, and I think it's meant to be played more for comedy the moment, but he is a bit awkward with her because he makes a comment about, the idea of taking orders from Tilly type thing. So they leave it as this question mark, and Tilly herself has said, I need to think about this, because she's really not sure. She brings up the fact that she doesn't have the sort of experience. Her role at the moment doesn't really suit for a leadership type role. But Saru is convinced that she can do it, and she has the character and the skills and all the rest of it, and that, yeah, she can be trusted and stuff. But he says, take a day to think about it. And by the end, you get this big emotional scene where Tilly is like surprised by the other crew members, and they do a lot. It's a bit cheesy, but it works well enough for what they're going for. But they all say yes, basically. It's like almost like a Spartacus type moment. Yes, yes, yes. And that convinces Tilly, I will take this after all. And Michael then joins them, so a bit of banter. And it's almost bringing Tilly and Michael back together. And I have to say, I do like it. I like that as a character beat for Tilly, even though there's some logical holes in it. I think it kind of makes sense with the story they've been telling this season with Tilly and Saru, because they've had some scenes together, and I think there has been a bond that's been formed between them, and that Saru has seen her growth in character, her like responsibility, and kind of just the way she put her neck out there for the crew and for the mission. So I actually like it for the time being. I think it's just a good character moment for Tilly and for the trust that Saru has in her. And although there's like maybe logical holes, at the end of the day, Saru can do what he likes as like the captain, and I kind of like that he's going against the grain. It does feel a bit like what they've tried to do with Discovery as a show, and I think storyline wise it sort of does make sense, because we have seen stuff leading up to this with Saru and Tilly, and some nice sort of scenes. So I'm actually on board with this, them making Tilly number 2, or at least acting number 2. I think they call it number 1 actually, although technically it's number 2 to the captain. So that's the episode. Let me know your thoughts on the episode this week. Like and subscribe if you are new to the channel. I will return to Star Trek Discovery soon, of course. The new episode will be coming out on Friday. Also, you can check out my reviews on the HBO show The Undoing. I've done all 6 episodes of that, so that's on the channel now. And also I've been doing His Dark Materials. For an older show, you can check out my reviews of the X-Files. I recently started reviewing them from the beginning. And also look out for a lot of Christmas themed streams and reviews this month, because it is the festive month, of course. So lots coming up on the channel. Thanks for listening. See you guys later.